Hi guys, so today we are going to be making a medium size Ankara bag. So for the main body of the bag, we are going to be using our Ankara fabric, but for the flap, we are going to be using our leather fabric. So we're not going to cut out one long piece because we're going to separate the flap from the body of the bag. So for the main panel, remember the main panel consists of both the back, the front, and the base panel. So we are going to measure out 18.5 inches for the height by 10.5 inches for the width. Now this 18.5 inches is the back, the front, and the base panel. Now the front and the back panel are going to be the same measurement, and for that we are taking 7 inches for the height, and for the base we are taking 4.5 inches for the width of the base. That's how wide I want the base to be. So now by the time you add 7 plus 7, that's the back and the front panel together, this will give you 14 inches plus the base, which is 4.5 inches, is going to be a total of 18.5 inches. And now for the width of the bag, we are going to take 10.5 inches. So I want the bag to be 10.5 inches wide. So we are going to mark out 18.5 inches by 10.5 inches. So let me just turn to this other side. So I'm using a paper. This is a cardboard. This is not a chipboard, so I'm using a cardboard to drag this out. So we're going to connect this. So I'm going to keep this aside. Next, we are going to cut out template for the flap panel. So for the flap, we are going to mark out 7 inches for the height. So the front part of the flap is going to be 4 inches, and the top part where the handle is going to be fixed is going to be 2.5 inches, and the back parts which we are going to connect to the back panel of the bag is going to be 1.5 inches. So now for the flap, we are going to mark out 7 inches for the height by 10.5 inches, which is the width of the bag. Okay, so now this is for the flap. Next, we are going to mark out or draft out the gussets of the bag. So now for the gusset, we're just going to cut it out, and then I'm going to explain how we got the measurement of the gusset. So for the height of the gusset, we are going to mark out 8 inches by 6.5 inches. So we're marking out 8 for the height of the gusset by 6.5 for the width of the gusset. So by the time we make our cutout, you are going to understand why we took 8 by 6.5 for the gusset panel. By the gusset, I mean the side panel of the bag. So you can call it your gusset or your side panel. Okay. So I'm just going to start with our gusset panel. So now on this bottom edge of the gusset, we are going to make a 1-inch square. So you mark 1 inch from the side, and you mark 1 inch from the bottom as well. So we're going to connect these. So we are going to repeat the same on the other side of the gusset panel. Okay, so now I'm going to explain how we got our 8 by 6.5 inches. So remember, the height of the main panel is 7 inches. Now by the time you measure from this top edge to this point, you are going to notice it is 7 inches because we are going to sew this cut out close this way, and after sewing it close, the gusset is going to be end up this way. So the total height of the gusset has to fit in with the total height of the main panel, as well as the bottom width of the gusset panel, because we are going to place this on the base panel. Remember, the width of the base panel is 4.5 inches. So these other 2 inches we added was because we're going to make a cut out on it. So this way, when you place it on your base, it's going to fit in properly. So now we are going to work on the flap panel. So we're going to mark out each part of the flap panel. First, we're going to mark out the front part of the flap, which is 4 inches. Next, we are going to mark out the top parts. Top part is going to be 2 inches, and then the back, which we are going to attach to the back panel, is going to be 1 inch. Okay, so now on this front part of the flap, we are going to mark 1 inch and connect the marks together. So we want to get the curve shape on the front part of the flap. So we are going to connect these together. You can use any curved object, but for this particular bag, I'm going to be using my thread curve to get the curve shape on the front part of the flap. So now you are going to place the curve. I don't know if you can see. You are going to make sure this edge of it is on this bottom edge of the flap, and then you are going to mark from these points. You're going to mark from this point, this 1 inch point. You're going to mark, and you're going to stop on this 1 inch mark. Then you're going to place the cup on this mark again. Now this time you're going to make sure the edge of the cup is on this line, and the edge on the side edge of it is also touching this other mark you first drew out. So I'm just going to place it this way. Okay, so you're going to mark from this. So this is basically how we're going to do it. So you're going to make sure the first mark is going to face up, the next will face down, the next will face up, and so on. So now after down, the next is going to face up. So we're going to place the curve this way. Just make sure the edge is on this bottom edge of the flap, and it's also touching this points of the other mark. So you mark it up. So now I'm going to cut this. So just watch how I'm going to cut this out. So cut following the mark. So you're not cutting this, you're going to follow this curve mark on these parts. So just cut this way. Okay, so now you can see the shape. So this is how to get the shape on the flap. So we're going to shape on the back parts of the flap. So just mark one and connect this point to this bottom tip of the top parts. So now we are going to use the main panel to cut out our carry board. So I'm just going to cut this out. So I've gone ahead to cut this out. So now we are going to cut out carry board for or interfacing for the flap panel. So just make sure this is, you hold this down properly, and we're just going to trace it out. We are going to transfer these lines to the flap panel because we are going to fold the top parts of the flap. So now I'm just going to mark out the back part, which is 1 inch. Next, I'm going to mark out the top part, which is 2 inches. Okay, so now I'm going to cut through the lines. So I'm just going to place my ruler. So on the main panel, we are also going to mark out each part of it, the front panel, the base, and the back panel, or the back part. So now we're going to mark out the front, which is 7 inches for the height. And the base is 4.5 inches. And the back part is also 7 inches. So now we're going to cut through, or cut a little bit across the line, so we can fold to get the shape of the base. This is basically how the shape of our bag is going to look like. So now, before prepping this or wrapping this with our fabric, we are going to use the template for the gusset panel to cut out two light interfacing. So I'm using my leather board. So I'm just going to place this on my leather and cut out two for each side of the bag. Okay, so I'm just going to cut the other side of the gusset panel out. For this bag, I'm going to be using this Ankara print, and for the flap, we are going to use this yellow leather fabric. We are going to wrap the main panel, and note that we are applying gum on this part where we marked out. So now we're going to allow this dry for some couple of minutes. Now this is dried. I'm going to place this on the wrong surface of my fabric. So you make sure you leave about half an inch on the edge, because we're going to fold the edge of the carry board. I'm just going to cut this out. So now I'm going to apply gum on the edge or edges of the interfacing. So allow this to dry for some couple of minutes. So I'm going to trim this off. So next we are going to prep the flap panel. So we're applying gum on the parts of the flap where we mark and cut through. So we're also going to apply on the wrong or rough surface of the leather. So now I'm going to place this right on top. And I'm just going to cut round the interfacing. Now we're going to apply on the edge of the interfacing. I'm going to apply our gum. Now this is dry, but I'm going to fold around the edge. So you have to make sure you follow this curved shape on the flap. So just make some little cuts. This way you can easily fold. Okay, I think I need to make a cut here as well. Next, we are going to wrap the gusset or the side panels with our Ankara print fabric. So I'm going to apply gum on one surface of this interfacing. So after applying your gum and allowing the surface to dry, we are going to place it on the wrong surface of the fabric. So now we are going to fold around the edge of the interfacing. So I've gone ahead to cut out this part because we are going to sew this close before attaching it to the base panel. So we do not have to fold these corners of the gusset panel. So I've gone ahead to fold the edge of the other gusset panel. So all we have to do is apply our gum on the raw edge of the interfacing. Remember, we're using our Ankara fabric, so we do not have to apply on the fabric. So applying just on the interfacing. Okay, so now I'm going to allow this dry for some couple of minutes, about 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to fold around the edge. So I'm just going to trim off these parts. So after lining the gusset panel, we're going to sew this cutout part closed this way. So the gusset is going to turn out this way. So you can use your pressing iron to remove the wrinkles on this. So I don't have electricity at the moment, so I'm just going to manage this. And you can always remove the wrinkles after sewing the bag. You can always use your pressing iron to remove the wrinkles. So I can do this after the bag is done. So now we are going to work on the handle, which we are going to attach to the top part of the flap. So now for the handle, we are going to mark out 2 inches by 11 inches for the length. So I'm just going to mark out my 11 inches by 2 inches. So now we are going to use this to cut out a light interfacing. So I'll be using my leather board. So I'm going to place this on my leather board and cut out just one interfacing because we're using our Ankara fabric for the handle. So we have to interface it to make it structured. So now I'm going to apply gum on one surface of the handle interface. So we're going to place this on the wrong surface of our fabric. So I'm just going to cut round. So we're folding all edges of the handle interfacing, both short and long edges. So we're folding both the longer and the shorter edges of the handle. So we're going to apply gum on the edge of the interfacing. So I'm going to allow this dry before folding the edges. Okay, so now I'm just going to gently fold all around the edge. Okay, so we are just going to, you can either apply gum on this part or you can use your clip to hold the handle together. Just fold it into half and use your clip to hold it and sew. But I'm just going to apply gum so this way while I'm sewing I don't have to struggle with trying to align the edge. Okay, so I'll just allow this dry a little bit. So now you're going to fold the handle into half. So you have to make sure the edges are properly aligned. So now we're going to top stitch on both longer edge of the handle. We're not top stitching on the short edges, just the longer edges of the handle. Back stitch. So now we are going to mark 1 inch from both short edge of the handle. So this is where we are going to stitch past when attaching the handle to the flap panel. Okay, now on the flap panel, first we are going to get the midpoint of the top part, and that's 1 inch. Remember the total width is 2. Now from this point we are going to mark half an inch. So just leave a little mark on that point. So first you get the midpoint 1 inch, and then from the midpoint you mark half inch inside. Okay, so we are going to remember, when placing your handle you have to make sure this smoother edge of the handle is facing the front part of the flap. So we're placing it this way. Now we're going to place the edge of this on this mark. You make sure you center the handle on this mark, and we are also going to repeat the same thing on this other side of the handle. Now we'll take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew a box stitch. So we're going to sew on this line, this 1 inch we marked on the handle. We are going to sew on this and also stitch on the short edge of the handle with 1/8 of an inch, or you can just sew a box stitch round this. So since I'm sewing a box stitch, you don't have to back stitch at the beginning. We're just going to sew all around and then back stitch later on. Now for the flap lining, I'm using my chipboard as an interface because I'm going to be using my Ankara fabric for the flap lining. So I've gone ahead to draft this out. I used the flap template to cut this out. So we are going to reduce this by 1/16 inch, so that by the time we line our flap, it wouldn't extend beyond the flap panel. So because this bottom part of the flap is curved, I am not going to touch it so I wouldn't stress myself connecting. So I'm just going to reduce the back side by 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm going to reduce the sides as well by 1/16 of an inch. 1/16 is just one box, or if you can even make it half the box, so I wouldn't move away totally from the edge of the flap, because we are still going to sew, and it has, when you are sewing the flap, it has to sew on the flap lining as well. Sorry guys, I had no idea my video stopped recording for some few seconds. So I've gone ahead to connect the marks and I have also trimmed it out. So now I'm going to apply gum on the surface of the chipboard. So I'll allow this to dry. So now I'm going to place this on the wrong surface of the fabric. Okay. So now we are going to apply gum on the edge of the interfacing or the chipboard. Now to fix your magnetic snap, you are going to mark 1/2 inch from the midpoint of these parts of the flap lining. So I'm using 1/4 inch. So now that we've gone ahead to mark out the 1/4 inch, you are going to take your snap and you are going to center this midpoint of the magnetic snap on this mark. So you center it and then you're just going to press it down. And you're going to see some mark the magnetic snap imprinted here. So I'm just going to use silver pen to highlight these marks. Just highlight these marks with your silver pen. So you're going to repeat the same process on the two other marks. So just press down the snap and then highlight the mark so that by the time you are trying to cut through, you can easily see the point where you are going to cut through. So now you are going to take your seam ripper and you are going to cut through these marks. So when using your seam ripper, you have to be very careful because this is a paper board. Your flap line is interfaced with a paper board and the seam ripper is always very sharp, so it can easily tear through when you are trying to cut. So you have to be very careful. Now you can see I'm struggling a little bit with this because the seam ripper is blunt. But when you are using a new seam ripper, you have to be very careful so you don't cut too wide. Now I'm going to pass the snaps through these marks. Okay, so you turn to the wrong side of this, and to secure this we are going to place our washers on the magnetic snap the same way we secured the button studs using a tape. So you're just going to press this down So what I normally do, I just press down one of the purse feet, one part of it, then place it on my plank, and then just hit this. So now we are going to line the flap panel with the flap lining. So we're just going to apply our gum on the rough surface of the flap panel and the flap lining. So you allow this to dry for some couple of minutes. So you're going to take your flap lining and place it on the flap panel. So I always like to make sure the front part of the flap panel is properly covered. So take this to the sewing machine and we are going to top stitch starting from this curved part on the back part of the flap. We're going to start from this point and we're going to sew all around and stop at this other point of the flap. So we're not top stitching on this back straight edge of the flap. We're starting from this point and we're going to stop right on this other edge. So first, I'm going to apply some machine oil. So back stitch. So when you're sewing on this curve, you have to sew as careful as possible so that you can follow the shape of the curve. So you just take it stitch by stitch. You can see the way I'm sewing and turning at the same time. So now we are going to work on the lining of the bag. So we're just going to place the main panel on the wrong surface of the lining and then we're going to trace it out. So you just hold this down and I'm just going to trace it. So before cutting this out, I'm going to add 1 inch to the lining piece. So now I'm just going to cut this out. Okay, so now we are going to apply gum on this 1 inch we mark out. So just allow this dry for a few minutes. So now I'm going to fold the edge of the lining to meet this line. So we folded one short edge of the main lining. Now on the other short edge, we are going to mark out 1 inch. So we're going to apply gum on this mark 1 inch we mark out. So now I'm going to allow this dry for some few seconds. So now you're going to fold the raw edge of the lining to meet the 1 inch line. We're just going to keep this aside. So now we are going to fix the bottom studs on the base part of the bag. So note we did not mark out the base on this part. You can mark out the base points on this part of the bag so that you can easily position your purse feet. But since we didn't do that, there is another way we can actually fit the purse feet or the base and bottom studs without marking out each part of the bag on the other side. So I'm just going to make sure this is properly arranged. Clip it this way. So now I can easily see the lines for the base of my bag. I am going to mark 2.5 inches from the short edge of the base. And following this mark, I'm going to mark 1 inch from the longer edge of the base. So since I'm fixing, so this is the point, and I'm going to be fixing four bottom studs. So we're going to repeat this on the four sides of the base panel. So first you mark your 2.5 inches from the short edge, and then you come to this longer edge and you mark 1 inch. You mark your 1 inch. Okay, so just repeat the same. Okay, so now you can unclip or you can remove your clip. Okay, so you can see the point. Now we are going to make a little cut through these marks. Okay, so now I've gone ahead to cut through. Now I'm going to pass my bottom stud through these marks. So you turn to the other side and you're going to lay this down. So in order to keep this secured, I'm just going to place my tape right on top. Okay. So next we are going to attach the flap panel to the main body of the bag. So now I'm just going to place this. I'm going to make sure this edge of the flap panel, both edge of the flap panel are on both tip of the main panel. So I'm going to place it this way, and then I'm just going to mark on this back part of it. Just draw a straight line so that by the time you are sewing, this line is going to be your guide. You wouldn't have to worry too much about the flap moving out of the right position. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and we are going to top stitch on the flap panel. So first we are going to stitch with 1/8 of an inch, and then we are going to come down with 2 inch and then top stitch again with 3/8 of an inch. So just make sure the bottom edge of the flap is on the line. So we are going to start stitching. First I'll apply my machine oil. So this is just to make the sewing very easy. So since we are making 2 lines of stitch, we are not going to back stitch at the initial. So I'm just going to stitch all around first and then back stitch later on. So we're going to come up with 2 stitch, then you turn. So now we are going to fix the female part of the magnetic snaps. So we need 3 of these and 3 washers as well. So to do that, we are just going to clip down the flap panel. So you just arrange it and make sure it is properly aligned on the edge. So now you take your silver pen and you are going to mark on this part of the male magnetic snap. So you are just going to press this down. Now we're just going to remove this, and you can see the points where we are going to fix our snaps. So as usual, you are going to center the midpoint of your filming magnetic snap on these marks. So I'm just going to use my scissors instead of my seam ripper to do this, because my seam ripper is kind of blunt, so I'm not really sure it can cut through this part of my bag. So just as if you're using your seam ripper, you also have to be very careful when using your scissors so it doesn't punch a bigger hole on your bag. So now I'm going to pass this through the hole. Okay, so I'm going to place this on my plank. So just clip this to check it out. So when you're working, always make sure you check out your work before going further. So now you can see this is okay. So now that we are done with the main lining, we are going to attach a slip pocket, just one slip pocket to the main lining. Now for the slip pocket, I have these already drafted out templates that I used for another bag. So just measure and cut out, let's see, this is 10, the height of this is 10, and note we are folding this into half, so the total height of the slip pocket is going to be 5, and the width of this is 8 inches. So I think that can fit into our bag because the width of our bag is 10.5 inches. So this will fit just right into our bag. So we are going to use this to cut out a lining piece. And for the pocket trim, I have this here. So yeah, so one way to save your materials when you cut out or draft out patterns for any bag, just try as much as possible to keep them for future purposes. So this is the pocket trim I used for this particular template of pocket. So the width of this is also going to be 8 inches by 1.5 inches. So just cut out 8 by 1.5 inches for the pocket string, and then cut out 10 by 8 inches for the pocket lining. So now you use this to cut out your lining piece, and we are going to use the pocket trim to cut out our exterior piece, that's the leather we used for the flap. I'm using my leather for the pocket trim. So you make sure you hold this down properly, and we're just going to trace it out. So I'm just going to place this here to hold down the lining. So next we are going to cut out the pocket string. So just place it on the wrong surface of your leather and trace it out. So we're going to cut this out. So now note that the edges, we are keeping the edges raw. We are not going to fold the edges of the pocket trim. So you have to make sure your scissors is very sharp, so that by the time you cut, your pocket trim wouldn't have gallops at the edge. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say. So you just cut this gently. Now we are going to draw a middle line lengthwise on the pocket trim. So since the total width is 1.5 inches, the midpoint is going to be 1/4 inch. Okay, so we're just going to keep this, and then we are going to take the pocket lining to the sewing machine. So we're going to fold. Now note that we're folding the right side of the pocket in, right side together. So you fold into half, and you have to make sure the edges are well aligned. So when you fold into half, we'll take this to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch on both sides of the pockets. Both sides. We're not top stitching on the bottom or the top part, just both sides of the pocket, after which we are going to turn it out to the right side. So now I'm going to turn this out to the right side. So now on the pocket trim, we are going to apply our gum on both sides of the line. So allow this to dry for some few minutes. Now we're going to place the raw edge of the slip pocket. We're going to place it on this line. Now you fold over the other half of the pocket string. We'll take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to make a box stitch on the pocket trim. So we're sewing both short side and both long sides of the pocket trim. Since we're sewing a box stitch, we don't have to back stitch at the initial. So now I'm going to trim down this pocket string. So now to sew the lining to the main panel, we are going to mark 2 inches from this top edge of the lining. Okay, so we have to make sure this is centered on the lining. Now first we have to get the midpoint of this, so you just fold it into half and then press this down. So this way you are going to get a line at the middle of the lining. Okay, now I have my line. Now I'm going to fold this into half as well, and I'm just going to use my pen to mark on the middle and then place it, center it on your main lining. So take this to the machine. Now we're going to stitch on both sides and bottom of the slip pocket lining. So now we are going to line the main panel. So I'm just going to apply my gum. So I'm going to allow this dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to place the edge of the lining on the edge of the main panel. So you just move it a little bit away from the edge. You don't have to align both together so that your lining doesn't stick beyond the main panel. And I'm also going to do the same thing on this other short edge of the main panel. We are going to top stitch on both short edge of the main panel. Now, as you can see, the space here is small, so what our advice is that you make this back part maybe 1.5 or 2 inches so that you can have enough room for you to easily top stitch on this. But nevertheless, I'm still going to top stitch on this part of the main panel and also top stitch on the front part of the main panel. So I'm going to top stitch on this. So I just switched my camera position so you can see what I'm top stitching on this part. So just push the flap panel back so you can have enough space to top stitch on the back part of the bag. Now we are going to work on the side panel of the bag. So we are going to be attaching a ring connector to the side panel. So we are going to measure out 1 inch because the size of my D-ring is 1 inch. So I'm going to be cutting out 1 inch interfacing by 3 inches. So we need 2 of the ring connectors on both sides of the bag. So we're going to use this to cut out 2 leather interfacing. So just place this on your interfacing and trace it out. So I'm going to wrap this with our Ankara fabric. So I'm just going to apply gum on one surface of the leather interfacing, and then I'll allow this to dry for about 5 minutes. So now I'm going to place this on the wrong surface of the fabric. So I'm not folding the shorter edge of the ring connectors because we are going to make a slit cut on the gussets or side panel and pass the short end of the ring connector through the slit. So I'm not folding the short edges, I'm folding just the longer edges of this. So I'm just going to trim this down. Okay. Now you apply gum on these longer edges. Okay. So you just allow this dry for some few minutes. So I'm just going to fold this. Okay. So now on the side panel, we're going to get the midpoint on this top straight edge of the side panel. Now note that this is 6.5 inches, and when you divide by 2, that's going to be 3.25 inches. So you mark your 3.25 inch, and from that point you are going to mark 1 inch down. So now you can see I just made a little mark down here. Now from this point we are going to mark half inch. So we are going to mark half inch to each side of this point, this 1 inch point. So when you mark half inch to the left and you mark half inch to the right, it's going to be a total of 1 inch. So this is where we are going to cut through to pass our ring connector. So I'm just going to mark on both gussets panel. So first you get the midpoint at the top edge, 3.25 inch or inches. Then you mark 1 inch, and then from the 1 inch you mark half inch to both sides of the side panel. So now I'm going to cut. We are cutting through the mark. So you can see I placed my ruler, so this way I would not cut outside the line. So just place your ruler to guide you. Okay, I still have to cut through this. Okay, you can see it. So now the ring connectors. So now we're going to pass this through our ring, that's the D ring, and then pass it through the slits cuts. So I'm just going to pull this. Okay. So your ring should face up, while this other part of the ring connector should face down the side panel. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and we are going to top stitch. First, I'm going to pass this. Okay. So we are going to top stitch very close to this slit cut to hold the ring connector in place, after which we are going to trim off the excess of the ring connector. So you back stitch. So now we are going to line the side panel. So just place this on the wrong side of your lining, move it a little bit away from the edge of the lining and trace it out. Okay, so I'll just, okay. So now we are going to add half inch on the top part of the lining. So that was why I said move it away from the edge of the lining. So add half an inch. Now, on the right side of the lining, we are going to mark out the half inch we added to the side lining earlier. Okay, so you are going to take your side panel and you are going to place this top edge of the side panel on this line. So place it on the line, and we are going to top stitch on the top edge of the side panel. So after top stitching, the lining is going to come down this way. So lay this flat and place your side panel and then top stitch. Lining the side panel, we are going to trim this down. So you just cut this off and then place it on the line. So now we are going to line the side panel. So just apply your gum. Now we are just going to lay this down. I'm going to trim the lining on the side and the bottom parts of the side panel. Okay, so we're going to top stitch. We're going to stitch this cutout close. So you make this tip on the side meet this other tip on the bottom part of it this way, and we're going to stitch to close it from on this side. So repeat the same thing on this other side of the gusset panel. So when after stitching, it's going to turn out this way. So you're just going to fold this and we're going to stitch. Okay, now that both side panels are ready, next we are going to be sewing it to the main panel of our bag. So we're going to apply gum on the edge. Okay, I'm just going to use my finger to do this. So this is just to help us hold the side panel in place. So you take one of your side panels and we're also going to apply all around the edge of this, except the top edge of the side panel. Okay. So allow this to dry for some few seconds or minutes. So you're going to take your side panel, starting from the base. I'm going to place this on the base part. Now you have to make sure the edges are properly aligned. You don't sew and then your stitch comes out wrong. So you can hold this with your clip. Okay, so first we are going to stitch this. Starting from the top, we're going to stitch all around to hold the side panel. Okay, so now I'm just going to apply a little bit of machine oil. So occasionally you apply a little bit of machine oil. Okay, so we are done with one side of the gusset panel, side panel. So we're going to sew or attach the other side panel to the bag or to the main panel. So I'm going to apply gum. So you allow this to dry for some minutes. So now I'm just going to place this on the base. So we're going to stitch all around.